A very, very warm welcome to all of you. So today, students, we will be starting with a new history chapter. In this particular part, so I've divided the chapter into two parts. So the chapter is the Vedic age, right? This will take you back in time and gives you very interesting insight into what the society was. How did your Vedas come into being, and what do the Vedas hold, right? Uh, what insights this particular period we have from. Okay, so on this note, so let's begin the Vedic age, right? So, students, I don't know if you all know or not, but we have four Vedas. Right? So there is the Rig Ved, Sam Ved, Yajur Ved, and Athar Ved. Right? These four Veds form the Vedas. Okay? Now, the Vedic age is basically the period after the Indus Valley civilization, right? Between the years 1500 to 600 BC is known as the Vedic age. And the word comes from the word Veda, which means knowledge, right? And students, we have a lot of evidence about what happened in this particular age, right? Although we do not get written evidence, okay, um, it was many centuries later that we these Vedas were written down. Um, these were passed orally. The whatever hymns and songs and poems were there in the Vedas, they were passed over orally. And it's only after centuries that we find that they were written on palm leaves and later on converted into books and manuscripts. Okay. So let's start with the Rig Veda. Okay. This is the oldest Ved, students. Okay. And it was composed approximately 35,000 years ago. Okay. And it has a lot of hymns. These hymns are known as suktas, and these hymns are in praise of God. So now, students, there are three very important gods that are mentioned in our Rig Ved, right? That's the Agni, Dev, Indra Dev, and Varun Dev. So the god of fire, the god of wind, and the god of water. Okay, Agni, Indra, and Varun. Okay. Okay. So these were the very important gods mentioned. Now, the Rig Ved, students, is divided into 10 books. Okay. These books are also known as mandalas, and they contain 1028 hymns. And these were composed by rishis. Rishis were basically the sages, right? The learned men. Okay. So the Rig Ved is divided into 10 books, also known as mandalas, which has 1028 hymns. Now, this is written in the old, or also known as the Vedic Sanskrit. Now, students, it is interesting to note that this Sanskrit is very different from the Sanskrit that you are now studying. Okay, you also have a Sanskrit subject. I don't know if some of you have taken or not, but this and that Sanskrit is not exactly the same. This Sanskrit is the old Vedic Sanskrit. Okay, and as I just mentioned, initially the Vedas were passed on orally, and it was only centuries later that they were written down. Now, students, Rig Ved is a very important literary evidence. Now, when I say that, you might be wondering that why is it that what makes it so important? What makes it so unique, right? Because students, any literary evidence, right? It gives you an insight. It gives you an insight into the forms of society, into the kind of people that were there, what were their practices, right? What did they believe in? What did they not believe in? Okay. And with the amount of vastness this Rig Ved and all of these other Vedas had, they have been very important literary evidence for historians. So now we will figure out how and what makes them, what kind of information, right? Uh, does the Rig Ved provide us with? Okay, so there is a lot of there's a plethora of information that we get to know. So first we get to know about the life of the people, right? So what kind of lives did people lead? Okay, so we get to know that cattle and horses were very important to the Aryans, right? The people, these people, the people who read and studied the Vedas were known as the Aryans. They called themselves as the Aryans. Okay, and they said that we get to know that cattle and horses were very important to them. Okay, then we find prayers for cattle, children, and horses shows clearly that how important it was for the people at this particular time, right? Why would you pray for someone? You pray for someone um, who is very dear to you, who is what do you pray for? You pray for things that you want, you pray for things that are dear to you, things that are valued, right? You would always pray for gold, and nobody would pray for being a thief, right? So at that particular time you see prayers for cattle in the Rigveda. You find prayers for cattle, for children, and horses. It means, it shows that these were very important. Okay, then we get to know that wars were fought for territory, for people, and for water, right? Water continues till date, continues to be a major source of discord, right? Wars have been fought over water, um, continues to be fought over water. Okay, then territory, you need more land, right? And people, the more, the number of people, the merrier. Okay, so wars were fought for territory, people, and water. And the war gains were divided into a lot of parts. So some of it was taken by the priests, some of it was given to the for the benefit of the kingdom, for the benefit of the tribes, not the kingdom. They weren't kingdoms at this particular point of time. uh, a part of the war, a bounty was even separated for the the yagyas that they had to perform. So for the sacrifices that were performed, right? Then students, at this particular time there was no really, not really a well defined army, right? And people, you would meet in assemblies to discuss war, its proceedings, and peace. So people, all and the leaders were selected on the basis of bravery and their warring skills, their war skills. Okay, we also find a lot of evidence of the yagyas that were performed, and these yagyas were performed by yagyas, or sacrifices that were performed by priests. And in these yagyas, so to the fire, to the fire god, to the fire, they would offer grain, ghee. Often animals were also, often you find, there is evidence of animals were also sacrificed, right? In these yagyas, and only priests were would perform these yagyas. Okay, so next we have, that's about the, 1 second. So we just got to know about the life of the people, how cattle and horses were very important, right? And they were fighting wars for territory, people, and water, and how the war bounty was divided, right? And people would meet in assemblies to discuss wars, proceedings, and peace. Okay, and how leaders were elected, and the yagyas. So that's about the people. Now the society. So now students, the society was divided into tribes, right? People were divided into tribes known as janas. Okay, so you find a lot of evidence of two words. Okay, there is, one is janas, and the other is vish. Okay, so that these are two words that we find very frequently. Janas are the, basically the people who were divided on the basis of tribe, and each tribe had a specific area which included a lot of villages. Okay, and the leader of tribe was known as the rajan. Now this rajan was students chosen on the basis of bravery, and also he controlled a very small area. Okay, and there were two kinds of assemblies. Okay, one is the sabha and the Samiti. So Sabha is was the assembly of all the important people, the elders, students. At this particular time in history, um, the older people were considered to be very learned, right? Because it was believed that they knew a lot and they had seen life, experienced life. So elders and important people had their own assembly. This was the sabha. The samiti was the general assembly, wherein members of every house was represented. Every family was represented. Okay, and to describe the community, as I just said, two words. We found a lot of evidences of two words being mentioned. One is jana, and the other is wish. Okay, um, and the people who compose the hymns in the Vedas, students, are known as the Aryans, while the others were known as Dasas or Dasyas. Now, students, it's very interesting how language evolves, right? So, Dasas were people who did not perform the sacrifices, and they also spoke a different language. And later on, like quite later on, these dasas came to be associated with slaves, right? So today when you say I don't know, there was a movie called Dev Das, and so das and dasis are is used for slaves. But the very initial, when you look at the how the language developed, we get to know that dasas were the ones who initially did not perform sacrifices, and they just spoke a different language, right? So they were just people who were on the opposite side of Aryans. Aryans were the ones who performed sacrifices, and they wrote the hymns. Okay, hymns in the Vedas. That's about the society. Now about the occupation. So clearly it was a very agriculture and a cattle rearing. Agriculture and cattle rearing were the main occupations, and people were also, there were a lot of priests, right? And as students, priests at this particular time weren't limited to sitting in a temple. These were the ones who also performed duties of being a doctor and a teacher, right? And they passed their knowledge to future generations. They were given this task of passing the knowledge to the future generations. um, and also you have people performing other occupations as well, which includes chariot making, jewelry making, metalwork, carpentry, weaving, fishing, and so on and so forth, right? Lastly, there is also, you find a lot of pottery as evidence. So now these pots, students, were made of clay, and also we also find initially a lot of handmade pots. Okay, handmade pottery. But with time, the potter's wheel was discovered. And if you all, I don't know if you've all seen a potter's wheel or not. So it's just basically a wheel on which the potter throws clay, and he gives the pot its shape, right? And once the pots are given shapes, they are fired in these skins, wherein basically furnaces, wherein at a very high temperature, the pots are strengthened and have become permanently very hard. Okay, so that's about pots and pottery. With this, we complete the first part, and I hope you got a deep full insight into what this chapter holds. Uh, I will come back soon with the second part. Till then, I hope you enjoy yourself, and also at the same time practice safe social distancing. Thank you so much. Have a nice day.